Hi, my name is Connor Riley, and on this week's Connor in Coverage, we're going to talk about the perfect way to start 2023 with a missed Ohio State kick and Georgia playing for its second straight national championship this upcoming week. Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Connor Riley here. Sunday night, Connor in Coverage, first one of the 2023 year. Got plenty to talk about tonight after last night's insane, wild, epic, crazy, whatever wild adjective you want to use to describe the game. Georgia 42, Ohio State 41. It was a game that featured a lot of yards, featured a lot of points, a lot of heroics, and not just, to put it all on one or two people, but we'll try to cover as much ground as we can here tonight and spend time in the second half of the show previewing Georgia versus TCU. As you can see on the bottom, played Monday, January 9th, a week from tomorrow at 8:15 out in Los Angeles. Georgia's planning on getting out there on Friday, so we'll be out there covering that when the team arrives there as they get ready for practice, get ready for TCU, and which would be a really interesting game. As Mike Griffith wrote earlier today, Georgia a 13-point favorite. It is the largest point spread for a title game and since the BCS era started in 1998 and really started seeing one versus two or the top two teams in the college football playoff era at the end of the season. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and let's take one step backwards to the final moments of 2022 and recap last night's game against Ohio State. And then later on tonight, we'll get into injuries, how Georgia looks against TCU, some of the shared history with these two programs, and where things go from there. But our first winner here tonight was we'll sort of keep to form here as we have over the course of the seasons. We're on here just about every Sunday night for the most part. Our first winner is the Georgia wide receivers. In the first quarter of this game, Darnell Washington went down with an ankle injury, and I believe, as my understanding of it right now, he's probably played what I think will be his final snap this season for Georgia. That ankle injury did not look good. He was on crutches and a boot. I could very much see him dressing out against Ohio State, or TCU rather, but I'd be surprised if he ends up playing and certainly playing a meaningful role in that game. But we still got time over a week away, and that could certainly change in that aspect. But I thought Georgia's wide receivers were a huge story last night. This is a position that has been so banged up for really the last 2 years and has constantly battled through injuries. And, yes, Ladd McConkey wasn't fully healthy last night. I think that's why Kearis Jackson was back returning kicks and punts for Georgia, and he made a difference there. And McConkey, play was a 2-point conversion catch, but didn't know that he had against LSU and had in other big games this season. The Georgia wide receiver room really stepped up in that game. Obviously, A.D. Mitchell with a late touchdown catch, sort of re-announcing himself to the national college football scene. He's played in 3 college football playoff games. He has a touchdown in each one of those, 2 of them being go-ahead touchdowns in the final moments. You just cannot simply say enough about him as a player and what he brings to this offense. And Georgia having him back, they don't win that game last night if they don't have A.D. Mitchell. The other big story I wrote about him today, Arian Smith, a guy who similarly, his entire career has been marred by injuries. He's missed time each season due to injury, missed the first 4 games of this season after having the tightrope ankle surgery. Coming into last night's game, he had 3 receptions for 66 yards on the season. He finished last night with 3 catches, 129 yards, and a touchdown, leaving poor Lathan Ransom in the dust on a touchdown that I think totally flipped that game. Georgia obviously gets the big stop out of the Kirby Smart timeout, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But that's just Arian Smith being a football player and creating a play out of thin air, and it's the easiest 76-yard touchdown pass that Stetson Bennett is ever going to throw in his career, either wherever that takes him from here on out. Yet big plays from him. Dominic Blaylock and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint both had big third down conversions to extend would-be touchdown drives for this Georgia team. I think the stat was, and Jake Rofe was the first on this, 5 different wide receivers had catches of 20 yards or more, and Ladd McConkey wasn't one of them. Kearis Jackson had a huge 35-yard catch to set up the Mitchell touchdown late in that game. You got contributions from the entire wide receiver room and sort of validating what we've heard so often about this group. There's a lot of talent in there. They haven't been able to get on the field and put it all together. I think you saw that on display last night. Stetson Bennett threw for a career high 398 yards. Over 300 of those were to the wide receivers. And so a big game effort from this position group. And Kirby Smart, I asked him about it afterwards and how impactful this group was. Given, so much of the story going into it was how was Georgia going to cover Ohio State's wide receivers. Georgia's wide receivers went out there and made a difference in this game.
Yeah, I thought BMAC did a good job selling to our team. We had several coaches stand up and speak on Friday, and he talked about, the personal respect level that he has for all the attention their receivers are getting, and they certainly deserve that. They're really good, really talented. But we got some good wideouts too, and they had a chip on their shoulder, and they wanted to make some plays, and they got a quarterback that can get them the ball, and a lot of those guys were able to come back, and it's really been by committee when you look at it. You see AD, Arian, Ladd, all kinds of guys making plays in the passing game for us. Marcus has made big plays.
Yeah, so just a monster effort there from the Georgia wide receivers in that game. And you need guys who, we're not talking about who are going to step up. And the wide receiver room, I felt like didn't get a whole lot of talk this week. The entire Ohio State media corps spent the week talking about these tight ends. And in the end, it's this wide receiver group that goes out and ends up making the difference in this game for Georgia. And I know Brian McClendon, first-year wide receivers coach, has come in, added a lot of talent to this room in this recruiting cycle, landing Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett before Christmas. They signed 3 wide receivers in the early signing period. He's very clearly put his stamp on this room, and I think you saw that on Saturday night in the win for Georgia over Ohio State. Our first loser is CJ Stroud, and Stroud is not a loser in any sense based on the way he played last night. I thought he was outstanding. Of the Georgia great quarterback performances I've gotten to see, he's right up there with what Bryce Young did in the 2021 SEC championship game. I think probably for the entire game, I thought Stroud was a little bit better than Bryce Young was, and right up there with Joe Burrow in 2019. Just a truly sensational performance from the Ohio State quarterback. 348 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 71 non-sack rushing yards, which I think was huge. And even late in that game, Georgia finishes with 4 sacks, and we'll touch more on the pass rush later. Georgia probably should have finished with 8-9 sacks in this game. And because of Stroud's mobility, which was something that was questioned going into this game, his ability to move, make guys miss, no more was this apparent than on their final play of the game. Georgia had a well-executed blitz. Shmuel Munden got through. And if Munden's able to bring him down, Stroud is in Ohio State are knocked out of field goal range entirely. Now, it turns out they were already out of field goal range. But, you're looking at a 45-yard play there on your last play of the game with no timeouts. And the fact that he was able to scramble away and even keep that a reliably, possibly makeable field goal, was 50 yards. Obviously, Noah Ruggles didn't end up making it, I think just speaks to how well he played in that game. I was so blown away with the composure, the poise that he played with. I'm going to have a story tomorrow on what he said after the game. And I don't usually touch on opposing players and what they say, but I thought there was so much respect from this Georgia team about Stroud and about the way he played from talking to players after the game, that it's pretty clear that they realized that CJ Stroud did a number on this defense, and that speaks to how talented of a player he is. And there were a lot of questions about him in particular coming into this game, and he was very well aware of that. I thought that was the game of the season from a player in this sport. And yes, it's a losing effort, but I thought he was sensational on Saturday for an Ohio State team that needed a performance like that. And I'll be the first to say, I thought Georgia was going to win this game by double digits. I was flat out wrong. I had said I thought Jalen Carter was going to be the best player of the game. I thought if there was a path to victory for Ohio State, Stroud was going to have to clearly be the best player on the field. I think he was. I think he was better than Marvin Harrison, in my opinion. Harrison, in large part, because he didn't end up playing in the fourth quarter after getting knocked out by Javon Bullard. But I was just so blown away by what C.J. Stroud did in that game. He's a loser because, unfortunately, in football, when you get a great game like that, that is an all-time great performance that'll be lost because the Buckeyes came up 1 point short in that game. And Georgia fans are thrilled for that. Another guy that is thrilled for that is our next winner, and that's Kirby Smart. And I got to offer a mea culpa here. When they kicked that field goal to go from down 14 to down 11 with just over 10 minutes to go, I tweeted, it felt like a surrender. It felt like this is, a waving of the white flag. Yes, it was about a 4th and 14 there. It came after a just disastrous play sequence where it's 2nd and 4 on the goal line. And instead of just handing the ball off to one of your running backs, Kendall Milton was the running back in the game at the time, where you've been running the ball pretty successfully all game. You do a reverse dump off to Ladd, and Stetson short arms the throw. I think both Stetson's execution on that play and Kirby Smart was very not happy with that. He couldn't catch it on the video, but in the press conference, he rolled his eyes like, I can't believe you did that, and I can't believe you're bringing this up right now. I can't imagine that play will be a lot of fun for Stetson in the offense when it gets brought up. But I also think Todd Monken deserves some blame there for calling that. I don't understand running that play in that moment. I thought maybe he got a little too cute there. But from that moment on, when he had to settle the field goal, Georgia ended up needing those points. It was a 1-point win. Those 3 points made a huge difference at the end of the game there for Georgia. From that point on, what he did and what Kirby Smart did was a flawless performance, not just within the confines of that game, but the way he had built up his program. Obviously, him calling the timeout before the fake punt where they got it, that's just heads up football. That's not reveling too much and getting a much needed stop at that point in time and knowing, hey, we got to keep playing because of the way that game had been playing out. Georgia had to essentially, similar to the Missouri game earlier this season, had to be perfect in the final 10 minutes of that game to come out with a win. And Smart, who we're going to play the audio here talking about what he saw that merited calling that timeout, it worked out perfectly. And it speaks to, I saw a commenter earlier talk about, that's why Kirby Smart is a $10 million man. Yeah, that's why he gets paid the big bucks. And we rarely see, Kirby Smart's game management acumen put on display because Georgia has such an overwhelming talent margin. But that's a moment where Kirby Smart can say, yeah, like you can question my clock management, way managed quarterback position. That's a moment that he can say, you guys can question me all you want, but I know I'm an incredible football coach who knows what he's doing in these big moments.
And their traditional formation. So a lot of teams carry that speed break. They come up the line quick. Everybody's lined up tight. We've seen it, in the SEC. A lot of teams carry it, and you try to practice it, but it's another thing when they actually do it and execute it, So it was one of those gut reactions that I didn't think that we had it lined up properly to stop it. And so call timeout.
All right, we'll go right.
Yeah, shout out to Kirby Smart's gut there for seeing it and reacting. And, they go out. Arian Smith hits the big play right after that to make it a 38-35 game. Ohio State drives the length of the field, but this Georgia defense is able to get a stop when they need to. Jamon Dumas-Johnson comes up with a huge third down sack, and that forces an Ohio State field goal. Georgia comes down, calmly executes a 2-minute drive, probably a little too quick because they didn't even use the full 2 minutes and gave Ohio State 54 seconds there. And then as we've seen from this Georgia defense, I think more often this year than we did necessarily last year, and sort of back to the 2019 defense, at times you've been able to move the ball on them in between the 20s, but when you needed this defense to bow up, they did it. They did it on those final 3 offensive plays of the game. I think Ohio State had a chance to really make that a much more makeable field goal. And while some of the blame falls on the shoulders of Ryan Day and how he play called in that circumstance, Kirby Smart stayed aggressive, stayed with the Georgia game plan that had gotten him at that point in the game. And the pressure that Stroud put on CJ Stroud on that third down, the run defense limiting that first down carry. Keely Ringo, who did not have the greatest of games, but that's going to happen when you're playing against a guy of Marvin Harrison's caliber and you have CJ Stroud having the time he had to throw. With the way that Keely broke up that big pass late, I think he deserves credit for that there as well. A big moment there late for this Georgia team and really Georgia winning a game the way Kirby Smart has built this program to be, being at their best in the fourth quarter. You hear him talk so much about keep chopping, keep fighting, keep going. Georgia outscored Ohio State 18-3 in the final quarter last night, and that's the big reason why they won this game. Is the way Kirby Smart has built this program. And yes, the timeout is what's going to get him a lot of praise and credit, rightfully so in those moments. But what he did this past Saturday, I thought, especially in that fourth quarter, is why. Look, if they win against TCU, there's going to be people saying right now he's the best college football coach in America, and I find it hard to disagree with that. Obviously, Saban has the long-term track record, but if we're basing on what we're seeing in the real time right now in the present, it's hard to argue against where Kirby Smart ranks in terms of being the best coach in college football, provided they go out and beat TCU, which is not a given, as despite what some people think. Our next loser, that's the Georgia outside linebackers. It's been pretty well publicized by this point. Georgia's already without Nolan Smith, who had a torn pectoral loss against Florida. I thought his absence really showed up against Ohio State. Not having him to pressure off the edge, I thought was a big blow in that game. Georgia had to get creative with how it pressured. Bringing Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Smail London, they weren't really able to get pressure with 4. And then when you have to get pressure with 6 and it doesn't get home and it's well blocked like Ohio State was doing for most of the night, in my opinion, that's what's going to allow Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka to win in one-on-one matchups. And then you saw that over and over and over again last night. And I think, you can get on Keely, you can get on Kamara, you can get on the secondary as much as you want. I think that the Georgia front 7 was the bigger issue last night. Jalen Carter was nearly a complete non-factor in that game. They got very little production from their edge rushers in that game. And then obviously they lose Chaz Chambliss there in the second quarter. And that is a significant loss because he plays on every one of those Georgia special teams. And he was playing a lot of snaps for Georgia at this outside linebacker position. And I believe his season is over as he suffered a pretty tough knee injury there. And so you're putting Marvin Jones Jr. and Jalen Walker into much bigger roles for this team going forward. And look, this is a thin room, and you saw it play out there at the end of the game. Robert Beal and Mykel Williams go down with injuries late in the game. My understanding is those guys were just cramping up because of all the snaps that they had to play and the chasing around of CJ Stroud they had to do. So I think with all those, bodies being out, no Nolan Smith, no Chaz Chambliss, you're putting such a big pressure on Robert Beal to play a lot. You're asking Marvin Jones Jr. and Jalen Walker to play way bigger roles than they've really been accustomed to at any point in the season. Chidera Uzo-Deribe is going to have a tough week ahead, and that's in addition to the fact that he welcomed in twin girls this past week. He's going to have to find a way to get more out of that outside linebacker room against a TCU team that we just saw put up 51 points on Michigan. Max Duggan, look, for all the problems CJ Stroud gave Georgia with his legs, I think Max Duggan is a better user of his legs to create plays for this team, for his team. And so Georgia's outside linebackers are going to have to really step up and come to play. It's going to be a really big game for Robert Beal. I think Marvin Jones and Jalen Walker are going to need to play roles in this game as well for the Bulldogs. But the outside linebacker position, they're going to get some new talent next year. They signed 3 top 100 players in Gabe Harris, Samuel Mpemba, and Damon Wilson. All those guys are going to be early enrollees, so they're going to be here in the spring. But this position group right now, as it stands, is limping to the finish line, and they're not going to be at full strength against TCU, and it's going to take a really gutty performance from Robert Beal and 2 youngsters in Marvin Jones and Jalen Walker, I think, to really get to that point. And then our last winner here is just college football fans in general. I think if you're a college football fan yesterday, obviously if you're a Georgia fan, it was a great day with the Bulldogs beating Ohio State 42-41. But, for so long we've wanted great playoff games. Games is in plural. We've gotten a few random ones throughout the year, Ohio State, Alabama in 2014, Georgia, Oklahoma in the 2018 Rose Bowl, and then the first Clemson, Ohio State game in 2019. But yesterday was the first time in the history of the college football playoff, 9 years, so that sample size is getting bigger now. It was the first time that we had 2 one-score games. In both those games, the team that was losing had a chance to drive the field at the end of the game and engineer a last-minute comeback. And ultimately, I thought it was a great day. If you're a college football fan, there's been a ton of debate about what comes next with this sport as far as 12 teams, how does, bowl sites versus playing games on campus. Last night is what the people who created the playoff had always envisioned. 2 extra great games that we wouldn't normally get, in the BCS era. And I think going forward, look, you're not going to get 8 one-score games. This isn't going to be the NFL, just with the way the talent gap in college football is, even if the transfer portal and NIL, I think, are changing that a little bit. But if you can get extra, 2, 3, 4 games like that over the course of the season, if you're a real college football fan, you absolutely take it. That's why, even some of these bowl games, as non-competitive as some of them are, Alabama, Kansas State, Clemson, Tennessee, with Tennessee really putting forth an impressive performance against Clemson. The real college football fans out there, they enjoy the Kansas-Arkansas 55-53 shootout. They enjoy the Notre Dame, South Carolina 45-38. They enjoy those extra games just because of the zaniness that comes with them at this time of year. And you're going to get that when you do see these college football playoff move to a 12-team format starting in 2024. And so I thought yesterday was a great reminder of that. And if you're an Ohio State or a Michigan fan, you're probably not feeling too great today. But if you're a Georgia fan, if you're a TCU fan, if you are just a general fan of college football in general, I think you're real happy with where things are right now. So with that, we're going to open it up to questions, thoughts, comments. TCU, as you can see on our ticker here, Georgia TCU, they play Monday night, 8:15. Georgia, a 13-point favorite. If you guys have questions or comments, ask away. I'm sure we've got a bunch coming out of yesterday. You can also go ahead and talk about really whatever. I've seen a lot of great posts already. Kibo Weiser. Yeah, I left the stadium at around 2:30, and then I went back to my hotel room and wrote. I didn't go to bed till about 4:30 last night, and then was up again at about 8 this morning working. So a long day, but that's why I like doing this for games like that where you're just like, what am I even watching? And you're frantically writing as the game goes down to the end of the wire, and you get to firsthand witness an all-time great college football game. Kirby's visor, I would agree. I thought Georgia's front seven was not good enough yesterday. And I know a lot of people would have come after the secondary, et cetera. That front seven was not good enough to win yesterday. And, I thought Schmel and Jamon at times did some nice things in that game, but you can kind of tell they were wearing down over the course of that game there. And that's why I think you saw them try and get some extra snaps for Tresman Marshall and Ryan Davis over the course of that game. And actually Kirby Smart sort of talked about that in the way in which working that in. And that's going to matter because TCU is going to run a high tempo, a lot of snaps, spread you out. That's what Sonny Dykes and this TCU system do. And so Georgia's at a time in the year where everyone is worn down and everyone is dealing with injuries. They're trying to find ways to spell guys like Jamon and like Schmel to get them extra rest. That way, at the end of the game, they can make big plays.
Well, we wanted to play a lot of players. When you get this late in the season, guys get winded. It's an up-tempo game. So, we say if you're good enough and you practice well enough, you should play. And we felt like against LSU, we had some guys that got winded in the game, and we wanted to play Tresman and Ryan. And Marvin had to play. We had Chaz go down with an injury, had Darnell go down with an injury. We had guys at one point, we had our third and fourth string guys on special teams that have not even played all year. So we're at the point in a long season where it's accumulating and you're having to play a lot of guys who maybe haven't played.
Yeah, so you hear Kirby talking about the importance of depth there, rotating guys in, putting guys in new circumstances, and that leads us sort of into this question from Steve Rogers, aka not Captain America. Short injury list. Darnell Washington is dealing with an ankle injury. I do not expect him to play against TCU rather, as it stands right now. Chaz Chambliss has a knee injury. I don't think he's going to play against TCU. Warren McClendon did not start yesterday, but he did dress out and was available. I think he can play against TCU, and I would probably expect to see him out there, though I actually thought Amarius Mims, without fully diving into the tape, watching it multiple times and seeing every out, I thought he did an okay job holding up there for a guy making his first career start. I would expect Michael Williams and Robert Beal to be fine. I know they left at times late in that game on Saturday, but I think both those guys were fine. We both saw them walking out of the locker room together. Ladd McConkey, I think, is clearly compromised. He is not the same player that he was earlier this year, but he is going to gut it out and going to play some type of role for this team. Obviously, A.D. Mitchell plays a huge role for Georgia on Saturday, making big plays late. So I think he is fully good to go for Georgia in that spot. Let's see. Beer cans and baddies. Yeah. Whoops, sorry, that's not the question. There we go. And I wrote about this today. Marvin Harrison was spectacular yesterday. And obviously, the front seven not playing well ties into that. But Javon Bullard's hit that knocked him out of the game, I think shows just how small the margins are in football, because if he leads with his helmet and moves his helmet, 2-3 inches one way, it probably is a targeting call. If he pulls up or moves, 2-3 inches to the right to try to further avoid hitting Harrison, maybe Harrison is able to hold on and make the catch. Obviously Harrison leaves the game, and I'm sure there are Alabama fans out there crying about, once again, Georgia wins because the other team lost their best wide receiver. It stinks that Harrison left, and you obviously want to beat an Ohio State team at full strength. But I thought that Bullard play one was a perfect hit. You could not do it any better, except for maybe, wishing that Harrison hadn't gotten hurt on the play. And it just shows, the inches needed to win a game. And Bullard, a guy who, if you go back and watch that play and watch where he starts to where he ends, when that ball is thrown, now granted, it was lofted in there. It was an insane throw to even get that close. He's inside the end zone, so he's not in the end zone, on the opposite hash, and races over there to dislodge the ball. It's really an incredible play from Bullard, and it's the small little ones that you need to make over the course of the game. You think the Brock Bowers fourth down, which Mike Griffith wrote about today, those small little plays needed that end up winning the game. And so, obviously Marvin Harrison was great yesterday, lived up to the billing. Personally speaking, I'm not sure how Jalen Hyatt won the Biletnikoff Award over Harrison. I mean, I do. It's because he had 5 touchdowns against Alabama, but there wasn't a better receiver in college football this season than Marvin Harrison. Having said that, TCU's got a wide receiver, Quentin Johnson, who is just as good as Harrison is yesterday. Had a big catch late in that game to add a touchdown to that game. He's going to be a first-round draft pick from the Horned Frogs, and he's a guy that is going to give Georgia some problems. And while the TCU may not have the wide receiver depth that Ohio State does, Quentin Johnson is absolutely a name to know there, along with Max Duggan, a Heisman Trophy finalist for the Horned Frogs. And there is some, shared connective tissue here. Tyman Mitchell was a Georgia defensive lineman last year. He is now playing for TCU, transferring there, becoming a bigger part of their defensive line rotation. And we mentioned him earlier, Chidera Uzodiribe was with Sonny Dykes at SMU last year and was on the staff at TCU when Dykes took over that program before Georgia hired him away to come be the outside linebackers coach at Georgia. So that'll certainly be a storyline to watch and follow in the run-up to this week. Let's see. B-Bean, we ran this clip earlier tonight in the show. Kirby just said he sort of recognized the formation because a lot of teams in the SEC have it, had a gut reaction to go ahead and call it, and very luckily it works out. Let's see. Yeah, and this is important to note as well for anyone, crying out there about whether it was a dirty or controversial hit. Marvin Harrison Jr. In the Ohio State locker room said he thought it was just a regular hit. It wasn't malicious or dirty or anything like that. Joseph Kennedy, that's a good point. A hit that Greg Blue should have been proud of. And yes, Jamal Major, it would have. I don't know if the referee could have gone back and recalled illegal touching, but Harrison was out of bounds before coming back and putting his hands on the ball. Let's see. I've touched on injuries earlier. When this show ends, you can go back and rewatch it starting at around the 21-minute mark. Let's see. We'll go a few more minutes here. As you guys can probably understand, it's New Year's Day. It's been a long day. And, it's going to be a busy, sprint to the finish here. Georgia plays TCU a week from tomorrow night. I'll be getting out to Los Angeles on Thursday. We're going to have a ton of stories, some from things that I had reported on last week, talk to players. Last week, you get a chance to talk to some people you don't normally get to talk to. I got a chance to talk to Oscar Delp, Marvin Jones. Going to have to write those stories this week because those guys are going to play very big roles for this team in this game coming up against TCU. You hope to maybe save some of those, and it's going way too inside baseball here. Save some of those for the offseason where the content is a little bit drier, but those are going to be stories that need to be written this week because those guys, as true freshmen, are going to be asked to play very big roles in the national title game. Let's see. Robert, as you can sort of see on the ticker, it'll probably be an 8:15 start. They say 8 o'clock. Last night's game didn't start till 8:20. They say 8, but it's usually around an 8:10, 8:15 start for Georgia TCU. B-Bean. So, no, the final Noah Ruggles field goal tip was not tipped, but had he hit it straight, I believe that Nazir Stackhouse would have gotten a hand on it, but because of the way that it curved, it missed Stackhouse. And, it's probably, if you're Nazir Stackhouse, you probably wish that you had gotten a hand on it because then that makes you an all-time hero. I think similarly to the way Lorenzo Carter is remembered for his big field goal block in the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma. Let's see. Yeah, Barry Watkins. Believe me, my brother, he was using the directionally named airline that you mentioned, and his flight got canceled after Christmas. And so, yeah, that is not fun. So, and sorry, Jaquel, if I mispronounce your name here, but Georgia, they got back to Athens last night. I think that's one of the real benefits of playing in Atlanta. You get back at a semi-reasonable hours, probably close to 2 a.m. by the time they got back to Athens. Game plan, prep today, recovery, etc., rest. It'll practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in Atlanta. They might do a practice Friday in Athens, and I meant Athens, not Atlanta there. And then they will fly out to California, Los Angeles on Friday, and then they will practice Saturday and Sunday in SoFi Stadium where the game is being held. Steve Brookins. Now, I don't think Darnell Washington will play on Saturday or Monday, rather. I thought that was a pretty significant ankle injury. And, you hate it for him. A guy who had a great year, I think has obviously solidified himself, certainly as a first or second round pick, possibly. And for him to not get a chance to finish out his career at Georgia, where he's just gotten better every single year and really grew a lot as a player and person, you hate it for him. Let's see. I have seen a lot of people say this, and look, the officials were not great in that game last night. I thought there were a lot of, obviously there was the one missed holding call on Jalen Carter late in that game where he just flat out got tackled. I believe that was on the 27-yard run by CJ Stroud there, and that was not the only missed hold on the night. I thought these refs were very consistent throughout the game. And look, you're going to miss calls from time to time, but in a game where you're supposed to have the best crews in the country, you can't be as bad as the officials were for both sides last night. They got some calls correct. The illegal motion on the 4th and 1 where the guy is clearly going forward for Ohio State. That is a big one. There's just things in that game that were missed. The initial spot on the Brock Bowers 4th down, I just don't. I get refereeing is hard, but there are areas where they just have to be better than they were. Let's see. We'll do one more good question here before getting out of here. That's right. Yeah, there was the missed false start earlier in this game on the big play as well, on a big 3rd down in that game as well. And I hate talking about the officials, and very fortunately they didn't decide this game, but I just thought they had to be better than they were last night. Let's see, maybe one. We'll go out on. Jay, that's a good comment. Let's see. I don't know the refs for next week yet. We'll probably learn that at some point later on in the game. This is a good one to go out on. Eric DeVosnay Sr. Again, sorry if I mispronounced your name there. I thought the Georgia running game was great last night. And, Dejon Edwards had some big runs. Kendall Milton had a huge touchdown on a very physical run there. I thought Kenny McIntosh was great. I'll have a story at some point this week on him talking about getting tripped up in the game that he had. Because once again, I thought he was a dynamic player that impacted the game as both a runner and a receiver there. And there were times, especially we mentioned on that 2nd and goal from the 4, where they do the just awful backwards pass to Ladd. Again, you've got a compromised wide receiver and you're throwing a backwards lateral to him. Obviously Stetson executed it poorly there, and Georgia's very fortunate that Ladd was able to get on top of it because there was an Ohio State player right in the area there as well, but a very strange play call. I'll be interested to see how Georgia's running game goes against TCU, because I thought that was something where they were clearly an edge for Georgia, and they did a very good job with that. And look, this is a Georgia team that is just bigger, faster, stronger than TCU. They should be able to out-athlete them. Now, Michigan should have as well, but there's a big gap in talent between what Georgia has and what TCU has. And, maybe Timon Mitchell illustrates this more than anyone. He's a key contributor for that TCU defensive line. He left Georgia because he was not going to be that for the Bulldogs this year. And so I think I look for this game. I look for Georgia to see how they go about establishing the run. Dejon Edwards took on a much bigger role in this game, and I think it's because he got some time to heal up. He had not been healthy in the second half of the season. And I thought Kendall Milton should have been more involved than he was on Saturday, and I'll be interested to see what his usage is for that game on Monday, because I think since we've seen him come back from this injury, he's added a level of explosiveness, of playmaking that can really help this team. And he has a very capable pass catcher for this team. And I think next year, he told Roddy Nabulsi of UGA Sports that he is coming back next year. He might not be exactly what Kenny McIntosh is in the receiving game there, but he is a plus player in that. And I think his ability to impact the game in that aspect is something that cannot be overlooked. So I thought the running game earned major marks yesterday. The guards for Georgia, Xavier Truss and Chait Ratledge and Cedric Van Pran, obviously the starting center. sort of been maligned at different times this season, especially with how they do in the goal line situations there. But I thought over the course of 60 minutes last night, they did a really strong job against a strong Ohio State front there. So that's going to wrap it up for here tonight. It is New Year's Day. It has understandably been a long day. We're going to have tons of content and coverage from you guys leading up to this week. I think Jeff Sentell, who's crisscrossing the country, he's going down to Orlando for the Under Armour All-American game on Tuesday. I think Georgia's got 8 guys there. I'm going to have a story later this week on the importance of that and having so many guys at one of those events. Because you look at this team right now, some of the major faces, Arian Smith, Broderick Jones, Keely Ringo, or not Keely at the specific game I'm going to be writing about, but those guys were at that event. Obviously you've got the national championship game preview coming up, Georgia and TCU. Mike Griffith is going to have a lot more on that tomorrow night on the beat. And then obviously Brandon Adams every Monday through Friday this week. And then he's going to get out to Los Angeles on Friday and preview another national championship. Georgia's got a chance to go out and do what no team has been able to do in the college football playoff, and that is win back-to-back national titles. It took an all-out Herculean effort to do it against Ohio State, a game I thought many people, myself included, thought looked lost at times, but Georgia kept chopping, found a way to win. They didn't quit when a lot of other teams would have, and it speaks to where this program is right now in terms of what they have been built up to be, and they've got one more game to finish off. It will be a truly special season, and we'll talk about this in the future, but how this team is looked back on, because obviously the 2021 team is a different sort of animal with how legendary it is, but the team also lost to Ohio State, or to Alabama, excuse me, whereas this Georgia team has found a way to win every game. And I do think that is going to hold a very special place in a lot of people's heart, especially when, from a natural talent standpoint, this team is not last year's team, but it speaks to something about the institutional knowledge that this team has. They're able to find ways to win games. I think the veteran leadership on this team is incredibly strong, and I know that was a big question losing. The program DNA was on display last night with how they fought and got back and won against a very talented Ohio State team. And that's what impressed me the most about that game. So we'll have tons of stuff for you guys throughout the rest of this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, we do this every Sunday night. We are going to do this next Sunday from Los Angeles, final show of the 2022/3 regular season. But look, the offseason is going to be super busy with news, as well as obviously transfer portal, coaching moves. Those are all going to ramp up here shortly, NFL draft decisions. So we're going to have you covered each and every way. So thank you guys so much for tuning in on your Sunday nights. Happy New Year's to everyone out there. Obviously, great start with Georgia winning right as the game hit 12 o'clock last night. My name is Connor Riley. This has been a DawgNation production. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and Happy New Year.